Grzegorz?
Yeah, so I wanted to share that currently around 80% of projects on GitLab.com are using cloud-native build logs. We see no visible redis or performance impact. The new architecture has been proven to be resilient enough because during the weekend on Saturday, we had this object storage service degradation, and build logs were working correctly except of slightly increased build workload time. Our correctness verification mechanisms detect the small number of malformed logs. It's around 0.002% of all the logs. So we are investigating that. Although the number seems very small, we would like to understand why it's happening. We have also enabled this feature for a customer on premises. You can see the link to the Slack thread in the agenda. And that's all I wanted to share.
All right. I know that Camille joined the call, but I saw him walking in the night, so I don't know if he can speak or not.
Yes, I can speak, but like I cannot turn on video. Sorry, okay. Unfortunately. So, Grzegorz, did you talk about my GitLab pages or did you not yet?
No, we skipped it. So you're up.
Okay, so like we achieved like the full rollout of what we can achieve today, which is like 75% of the requests plus 60% of the domains. To have much higher rollout, we need at this moment like to perform data migration, because like we are actually serving with GitLab pages all the recent deployments of pages, but we don't have the prior data. I also like link a bunch of the different aspects in the doc. So if you are interested about the cost estimates, how much we will be saving, and how much we can shrink our infrastructure with that, and also like 2 epics where like in one we track all the remaining engineering work for the GitLab.com rollout, and like second epic for the GitLab.com rollout, and like what dependencies and like what are the next steps. It's being like currently filled like with more data as we like develop, for example, after this GCS outage. We actually survived that, but we also noticed like a few aspects that we may improve, so we just gonna do it. And like this kind of like an outage that we had with the GCS, it's not gonna make pages like to be much more resilient to this kind of failures. Maybe any questions do you have about like these sections that I put there?
No real questions, but I did want to, this is Brent, if you can't see the call, I did want to thank you for your help on Saturday when there was the GCS interruption. So that was very helpful and greatly appreciated.
Good, happy that I could help. Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess this is everything like in my first section from my side. I think that like the next section is what we are being blocked on, and for me it's like the storage bucket. It's really part of our next rollout aspect, and this is something that we're gonna need probably like Wednesday or Tuesday this week in order to start like testing the next aspect. So far as like the timeline goes, I think we are pretty much on the track to start doing some proof of concept of the data migration this release. We don't really see any performance problems so far, so I guess like so far it's going pretty great. Grzegorz.
So basically, if regarding the blockers or the next steps for cloud native build logs, I think it's just increasing the rollout to 100% on GitLab.com soon and closing the epic about GitLab.com rollout. So yeah, but I think that we should go back to what has been done, and the next is Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that I've been working on a financial model to help us kind of think through some of the opportunities for a multi-large instance. So, you know, we're thinking about EU and China and some other locations. And so I put together sort of an initial model to capture the costs, potential costs of a multi-large site. And then it's trying to answer the question of like how many paid users would we need to make that site financially viable. So I linked the issue there. This is just an initial stab, but I'd love if anybody has any comments or feedback, feel free to go in there. The spreadsheet should be available to everyone. You can leave comments in the issue or on the spreadsheet itself. But yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
And I just had a quick question. Are the cost model, is it using the current reference architectures?
Yeah, so it's based off of our existing infrastructure for GitLab.com, which should map closely with the 50K user reference architecture. But I wanted to map it to our infrastructure because I know we're doing some additional things on top of the 50K users.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because one of the things that we're working on, Jason has been working on this, is to sort of map the current reference architectures, which are full self-managed, into cloud native. So they're going to look slightly different. So we'll keep you looked into that in case you want to, you end up needing to adjust the cost model.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks.
All right, Sid, I knew this day was coming.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before I go into congrats on the GitLab Pages rollout. When I saw an outage in GitLab Pages this weekend, I was like, that's logical that we have some teething problems with new functionality, but it was a cloud provider letting us down. So great work by Camille and everyone else for such a big change. It's gone very smoothly. And the day that's coming is that we have a large financial services provider interested in GitLab managed for them, but on their own hypercloud account. I think we set a threshold, but I don't remember it. I think I set a threshold of $10 million ARR. That's a customer like that would have to add. So we're not going to do this for everyone. For now, it's just really big accounts, and so that we can put people on this to manage it and still have a great gross margin. I advise this group to start looking at best practices. And this is the way we did it with GitHost, was we kind of fell into that. I think we know that there's a lot of infrastructure software providers that offer a managed service, MongoDB, Elasticsearch, Kafka. I think we should learn from them. We should look at how they offer that and understand the nitty-gritty, like what cloud providers do they offer it on, whose account is it on, how is it built, what's the VPC setup process, what are the access controls, who can access what, who can do what, so that we can figure out what the best practices are. And yeah, I'd love for this meeting maybe to decide like who can do a deep dive, but maybe start with questions.
I guess my first question is the assumption that we are cloud native in order to be able to do this, or are those independent questions, meaning, the revenue is important, so no matter what happens to cloud native, we sort of dive and do this?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'll answer your question directly, so feel free to make this a two-way conversation. But if we want to back out of this, like this is the time, we still have a window of opportunity of a week or two to say, okay, we're just not going to do this as a company. If we don't reset expectations with the customer in a week or two, then we're going down this path and we'll have to deliver. Now, the customer doesn't care how we deliver it, as long as it's like reliable and up and things like that. But I think it's very likely we'll end up with the hosting it on the hyperclouds, the 3 Western hyperclouds. I think that's what Mongo and Elastic and Kafka are doing. Or Kafka, I should have put Confluent in, the commercial company behind Kafka. And then if you host it on cloud providers, look, that your instances are going to go down and things like that. So in that case, I think it makes sense to host it cloud native. And I think this will not be the last customer. And if it's a success and our margins are acceptable, we might lower the bar and do it for a lower dollar amount. So, and we learned with GitHost that auto scaling is like very important and very hard to get right. So I think if you don't do it cloud native, you'll end up writing your own cluster manager, which is, I think, a business I don't want to be in. So yes, the short answer is yes, probably this needs to be cloud native, and this is probably limiting. Or limiting, but this will be cloud native, even though that will not be ideal for the first customer, but it will be better for the company 100 customers in.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is because so clearly this would be a very high profile customer where we own their infrastructure and application stack. Our cloud native dates were sort of in July of next year. I would assume that would have to be brought in significantly depending on when customers would expect this. And if the cloud native stuff is not ready, then that essentially translates into essentially assigning people to operate this instance, because it's going to be very different from GitLab.com no matter what we do. Even if we use the reference architectures, which is something we could do, one of the things we haven't figured out yet is how to go from one point to the next in a sort of in an online fashion. So I think there are a lot of variables. I think what you're asking is the answer to this question in some ways, like dive and tell me what we should do if we should do this. And you have maybe a week and a half to put together whatever the answer might be.
Oh, no. So what you need in a week and a half is the answer to, hey, should we do this as a company, or are we in much trouble? I think we have a lot more time to figure out how. And although like cloud native would be ideal, and I was kind of pushing for that, on the other hand, it makes sense to just do them with a reference architecture if that's a lower risk. And first convert GitLab.com to cloud native and only then convert the customers. And what we can just do is over provision them a bit so that you don't run into any scaling problems.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the things we might look into is what is the cost of over provisioning them to just buy the runway to put them in a reference architecture that is just going to service them. It's going to cost us more, but
there's going to be a team that's responsible, and they're going to report up to people, and that team together with the people they report up to can decide what they want to do. They will want to roast it on Raspberry Pis because it's more reliable. Let's do that. I think uptime is of the utmost importance. So okay. I'm saying something else I was saying 5 minutes ago.
It's okay. That's why it's a conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to take point on this and drive this and have something for the end of the week as far as an answer of whether we should do this and how we might do it. Obviously, there are other questions and we should pursue them.
Cool. And don't forget to look at what other people are doing, because I think a lot of companies learned a lot over the last few years, and I think we should benefit from that.
Yeah. Toon, you have a question?
Yes, basically, my question is, do we expect that the customer's configuration will be kind of customized per their specific requirements? And then that will lead to the question, we plan to support them. And then when we get more and more customers that we host for them, how to scale the support for those customers. This is a good rehearsal of the multiple GitLab instances. But when we get more and more customers like this, the support cost may increase if we don't find a good way to scale.
Yeah, I would. I think my answer is let's hope we don't customize, and that's why I'm imploring us to look at what other people are doing. And I think Mongo and Elastic and all these others don't allow much customization. They just allow you to size it, and that's it. But figure out what they do and where they hold the line, because they figured this out. And if they're holding the line somewhere, we should hold the line at the same point. Otherwise, we know it's not going to scale, as you said.
Good to know. And I think I want to circle back. So maybe that makes more sense to have a, a standardized deployment configuration tool. So all the deployments are standardized. We give options,
Yes,
but
for
they
sure.
should only,
For sure.
yeah.
And right now we have 8 Terraform scripts at GitLab. So we are standardized on 8 different ways to install like a non-cloud native installation. So there's people working on that, and probably the basis of that is going to be our performance environment builder. And so if we're not going to go cloud native, probably we should use that. But those are decisions that Jarvis will make.
Yeah. Thank you. That's my question. And over to you.
I just want to add one comment to that, if I may. So customization is the extreme case, and that's usually an easy no to almost any customer. The thing that they're really going to push is prioritization, and we should definitely build a process that allows for that. Internally, we manage that through the infra dev stuff, but this is going to be an entirely different ballgame. We've lived through some of that with T-Mobile. This is going to be a game changer because now it's their instance, and so they're going to push for that. So we should definitely, and I'll make sure we cover that, have awareness that they're going to push for their priorities. GitLab.com will be an entirely different thing that they won't care about it, but and I think that's what we're going to see the most stress on. And in my experience in prior lives, customers may, you may say, no, you can't have this because we're not going to build it for you, but they're going to say, I have these 3 problems and you're killing me. So I want you to fix them before everything else. So we'll have to figure out ways to balance that out.
Exactly. And I think as a best practice, maybe not mention customer names. I don't know whether it's private or public, but I think we should just not do it in these things. You can put it in the chat if people need it. But I think exactly that. And I think it would be great to talk to some existing providers and see what they've done. That's probably not on their website. We probably need to talk, but like we're not competing with Confluent. Maybe we can get someone there to help us. Same for DataStax. And there's let's first make a list of all the people offering this, but there's a lot of companies offering this. This is the most prominent business model to monetize open source software. So let's learn from how they manage that. And that's a complex answer. And for example, one question I like, hey, should we have professional services? Like you can only buy this with at least 100K or $500,000 of professional services so that the infrastructure team that supports them doesn't become like the go-to team for product requests. Stuff we have to figure out.
All right, Josh.
Yeah, sure. I was just curious if we've done any diligence on collecting the requirements. For example, whether they need to have or prefer to have some kind of peering going on between the instance and their own infrastructure for deployments or something like that, as well as availability and other requirements that might go through, and also kind of who would be the best person to connect with on these to provide an account team.
Yeah, we haven't, and I think we shouldn't. I think we should think of what we want to offer and then go back to them. I think if we do it the other way around, if you ask someone first for what they want, and then you say, oh, you're not going to get it 3 months later, that's not great. I think we should go back and say, okay, well, in case you want to manage service and not .com and not self-managed, this is what we offer. Otherwise, we're in the consultancy business, and we should stay away from that.
Yeah, I agree with you completely that we want to define it on our terms. I'm just curious, from a could be as an interesting input if we already have some idea what we're looking for. But yeah,
we don't,
anyways.
and I don't.
Okay.
Jerry can do whatever he wants, but I recommend we first make sure that we get an offering together and we present that to the customer.
So I think you mostly answered, I think what I was going to suggest here is that a customer like this is most likely looking for us and what we're going to offer from the perspective of what we enable for them, and kind of defining that around the services and like service levels. And so like internally, we need to evaluate how we provide that, and what mechanisms we need to put in place to deliver on that. But most of that won't necessarily need to be part of the offering details, other than where maybe some choices that we want to be a little bit more deliberate about make a difference. Like if we want to say that there's a preferred hosting provider, something like that, but we don't necessarily need to deliver in the details of this to the customer exactly how we're going to do it all, but more of what they're going to be able to consume. Am I correct in characterizing it that way?
Exactly. And it's not going to be preferred hosting provider. It's going to be like, this only works on these clouds.
Yeah.
Like, and then they can say, well, you only deliver on an AWS, but I really need it on GCP or Azure, and we can consider that. But there's a way to find out which customer it is, and we can guess what cloud they want to use. But like this is not even preferred. This is like clearly delineated. Like if you go to Elasticsearch and you say, hey, I want to host this on DigitalOcean, they just say, well, we won't do that.
Thanks.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm basically seeing this as a potential opportunity to just prep for the instance where we might be, running self-managed managed services for FedRAMP customers. Basically aligning with like a cloud provider that we might end up using, and tooling these managed services to that provider and those types of team structures that we would have set up in place. Just basically maybe a nice walk scenario before we're doing the run of FedRAMP if we get to that point.
Yeah, in some bright future, we're going to have over 100 of these installations running, and GitLab.com would just be another one. Right? We'd have SDR teams just running all of them, and GitLab.com would just be a bit of the biggest one, but they'd run the same as everything else.
All right. So I'll be following up with lots of you over the week to put this together. Moving on to what's next. Camille, I have followed up with Brent on the storage bucket, so I'll have an answer for you tomorrow. And then Grzegorz, do you want to verbalize your section?
I think that we covered that already.
All right.
So your point is next.
And then I have this item where we discussed last week about putting Cloudflare in front of GitLab pages, and I will work with Brent and some other folks to scope this. Jarv?
Yeah, I just had a couple comments there that for custom domains, we need to be careful with the IP address that people have their A record set to in some cases, and also that our cache control headers and that are set right now are not conducive to putting this in front of a CDN, so we'll need to look at that as well. But maybe this is too detailed. I just wanted to make sure that was taken into account.
Okay. Yeah, what I will do is I will drive this through the architectural workflow, because that will allow us to essentially collect and connect with everybody who's a domain expert on this, so we can put the right set of work together. So, and also another follow-up item on the cloud native reference architectures. JSON has been slammed, so I may approach some folks to add some help. I was thinking about someone in infrastructure, because or I'm thinking Scarbeck or folks like this who have a lot of Kubernetes knowledge to just try and help out to get these. We need to get these reference architectures done. Otherwise, we can move forward with the Helm work. Anyway, that is all I had for today. Anything else? Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.